Hope is a quiet thing. It rarely announces itself. Often it lives inside people, the way a small flame hides in cupped hands, protected, trembling, afraid of being seen. Some carry hope like a fragile secret, tucked into the softest part of their inner world. They do not speak it aloud, because speaking makes it real, and real things can be broken. So they hold it gently, quietly, privately. And if you look closely, you'll notice something unmistakable. They do not lack hope. They fear what hope asks of them, the vulnerability it exposes, the possibility it carries, the disappointment it risks. This is the psychology of people who dream in silence, believe in shadows, and love the idea of a future they cannot yet bring themselves to touch. There is a particular stillness in people who carry their hope in secret, a kind of quiet that settles around them like dawn light slipping under a closed door. It's not emptiness, and it's not apathy. It's more like the careful hush of someone who has learned to guard what matters most before the world has a chance to notice it. When something good appears on the horizon, an opportunity, a possibility, a gentle shift, these people do not rush toward it. They pause first. They study the shape of their longing with an almost reverent distance. Not because they don't feel it, but because they feel it too deeply. Their hope is rarely impulsive. It arrives like a delicate bird perched in their palms, fluttering, vulnerable, asking for trust they aren't sure they can give. Inside, the emotional landscape is soft but intricate. They might smile at the thought of something new, but the smile is small, private, hidden behind lowered eyes. They dream inwardly, in a language no one else hears. In their mind, entire futures unfold quietly. Imagined conversations, possible beginnings, faint sparks of what could be. And yet, none of it escapes into the open. Not yet. Not until they're certain it's safe. For them, speaking hope aloud feels like tempting fate. Words feel heavy, almost dangerous. Naming something too soon feels like pressing a hand against thin ice. You don't want to be the reason it cracks. So they keep their excitement gentle, unspoken, wrapped in layers of emotional caution. They choose silence, not because they lack imagination, but because imagination is the only place where hope can remain untouched. These people often appear calm on the surface, even when something inside them is rising, warm and luminous. They move slowly, with the kind of quiet restraint that confuses those who believe hope should be loud, celebratory, shared. But for them, hope is intimate, personal, something that must be shielded, like a secret wish whispered into cupped hands. If you watch closely, you'll notice the small signs of it. A softening around the eyes, the way they linger a moment longer when something feels meaningful. A breath held just a little too long before they answer. Their subtle shift in their voice when they talk about a possibility they haven't yet admitted they want. These small signals are their version of celebration. Quiet, controlled, tender. Internally, their hope doesn't surge. It hums, like a low, distant melody that only they can hear. They revisit it often, savoring the possibility without placing weight on it. They imagine outcomes but cushion them with maybe and we'll see and for now. It's a way of holding desire gently enough that it won't bruise. This hidden hope is not cowardice. It is protection, a learned way of loving possibility without letting it overwhelm them. For many, it began long ago, before they understood why hope hurts, before they knew what disappointment could do to a tender mind. Over time, they learned to move carefully around anything that asks for emotional exposure. Hope became both a light and a liability, something beautiful, but also something that could slip away. And so they carried it in softer ways, quieter ways, ways that allowed them to feel without falling. In the privacy of their thoughts, hope expands freely. But in the world, they tuck it close, holding it the way one might hold a small candle in a windstorm, shielding it with both hands, not to hide it, but to keep it alive. And this is where their story begins, with a soft light hidden, a quiet longing folded into the heart, and a person who has never stopped hoping, only learned to hope carefully. Before someone learns to treat hope like a fragile secret, there is usually a moment, sometimes remembered, sometimes buried, when hope first revealed its sharp edges. It may come from childhood, a place where feelings are new and enormous and easily shaped. A child hopes loudly, without restraint. They wish for simple things, a parent's attention, a small joy, a promise kept. But when those moments collapse, when promises dissolve or affection becomes unpredictable, something shifts inside them. Children don't understand the complexity of circumstance. They only understand patterns. If hope repeatedly leads to disappointment, the nervous system makes quiet adjustments. It teaches caution. It teaches waiting. It teaches silence. Maybe the environment was loving but inconsistent. Care that appeared and then disappeared. Affection that felt warm one day and distant the next. In such homes, children learn to read emotional weather the way sailors study tides. They monitor cues, anticipate outcomes, and manage their own expectations long before they should have to. For them, hope becomes a variable too risky to rely on. Some grew up in environments where excitement was met with dismissal, where happiness was told to calm down, where dreams were met with warnings, sarcasm, or pragmatic pessimism disguised as realism. In these spaces, external voices echo inside for years, shaping the belief that hope must be moderated, softened, controlled. Others learned caution in more subtle ways. A parent who worried excessively, a family that feared disappointment, a culture that prized stoicism over emotional openness. In such contexts, unguarded hope felt childish, something to outgrow, something naive. So they learned to internalize their longings, to keep dreams quiet until proven safe. And then there are the more painful roots, a heartbreak that arrived too young, a betrayal that cut too deep, a moment where trust shattered so abruptly that hope became something dangerous. These experiences don't just teach someone to avoid hope, they teach the body to brace for impact. The muscles remember, the breath remembers. The mind learns to preemptively tighten around the possibility of loss even before anything has been lost. Over time, the person grows, but the pattern grows with them. They enter adolescence or adulthood with a quiet, unspoken agreement inside themselves. Do not hope too loudly. Do not want too openly. Protect the soft parts of your heart from the world's unpredictability. They may not think of this consciously. It becomes instinct, a reflex, a way of moving through life with measured emotion, like someone walking across a bridge they're not entirely sure is stable. And yet, even in the midst of caution, the longing remains. Hope never truly disappears. It simply retreats. It becomes something internal, something managed carefully and revealed only in glimpses. It may surface in private fantasies, late-night thoughts, quiet wishes made when no one is listening. But it rarely becomes a public declaration. Silence feels safer than exposure. Restraint feels safer than enthusiasm. This origin story is not one of weakness, it is one of survival. A person learns again and again that the world does not always catch what falls from their hands, so they begin to carry their hope the way one carries something breakable, wrapped in protective layers, held close to the chest, sheltered from unpredictable winds. This chapter is not about blaming the past. It's about recognizing the soil in which guarded hope first grew. Because once you see its origins clearly, a deeper truth reveals itself. The fear surrounding hope was never a flaw. It was a protective instinct formed in response to real emotional weather, one that shaped a quieter, more cautious relationship with longing. The human mind is engineered to protect itself, not through aggression and not always through avoidance, but often through subtle emotional regulation habits that develop early and stay beneath conscious awareness. Silent hope is one of these mechanisms, part psychological strategy, part emotional instinct. From a neurological perspective, hope lights up the brain's reward pathways. It increases dopamine, heightening anticipation and emotional investment. But anticipation also activates the brain's threat detection system, specifically the amygdala, which scans for potential disappointment. For those who have been hurt repeatedly, the amygdala becomes more sensitive, more alert, more cautious. The brain begins to associate hope with vulnerability rather than possibility. This creates what psychologists call protective inhibition. It's not the absence of desire. It's the intentional softening of desire to protect the self from the shock of unmet expectations. Attachment theory also plays a role. Individuals with anxious or avoidant attachment styles often learned early that emotional needs may be met inconsistently. To cope, the mind forms habits of self-sufficiency, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Hope becomes an internal experience rather than something expressed outwardly. For avoidant types, expressing hope feels like relinquishing control. For anxious types, expressing hope feels like tempting disappointment. Both strategies lead to a similar outcome. Hope is felt internally, but concealed externally. Expectation theory adds another layer. People subconsciously set their expectations low to manage emotional pain. This doesn't mean they don't dream. It means they keep their dreams in a quiet, softly lit space where no one can disturb them. They tell themselves, maybe, instead of yes, we'll see, instead of I want this, all to create emotional cushioning. Emotionally, this pattern also relates to disconfirmation bias, the brain's tendency to look for evidence that confirms familiar feelings. If someone is used to disappointment, their mind prepares for it, expects it, and protects them from its intensity by never fully committing to hope in the first place. And then there's the social layer. Some people hide hope because they grew up around others who misunderstood or minimized their desires. They may have learned that sharing dreams invites judgment, advice they didn't ask for, or skepticism that feels like emotional cold water. Over time, the easiest path becomes silence. Silent hopers aren't pessimists. They're realists shaped by experience, guided by the psychological desire to remain safe. The mind does not silence hope because hope is bad. It silences hope because the emotional cost of losing it once felt too heavy. But beneath all of these theories lies something simpler. The human heart is built to avoid pain. And when pain has been linked to hope, the heart creates distance, not to erase hope, but to protect its tenderness. This silent hope is a form of emotional craftsmanship, a way of feeling without exposing too much, a way of dreaming without risking collapse, a way of believing quietly, safely, privately. It is not emotional suppression, It is emotional calibration, a careful adjustment made by a mind that has learned the price of unguarded longing and chooses to hold hope softly, like something precious. Inside those who treat hope like a fragile secret, there is a constant, delicate tension. One part of them longs to believe, to feel excitement, to imagine a future, to reach for something soft, warm, and promising. Another part pulls back, cautious and grounded, reminding them of past experiences where hope felt like opening themselves to the possibility of loss. This push and pull is not dramatic. It rarely shows itself in grand gestures or emotional turbulence. Instead, it unfolds quietly in small internal negotiations. They might feel a flicker of excitement when something good begins, but almost immediately, a second voice rises. Be careful. Don't move too fast. Don't let yourself get carried away. Hope whispers forward. Fear tugs backward. This inner conflict often surfaces in subtle forms: overthinking, emotional restraint, or hesitating before committing to belief. They imagine positive outcomes, but cushion them with contingency plans. They allow themselves to feel, but only within controlled boundaries. They rehearse disappointment before it arrives, trying to soften its impact. Rumination plays a role. Their thoughts circle around possibilities, analyzing every angle, attempting to predict which future is safest to invest in. But rumination doesn't kill hope. It contains it. It places it in a mental room where the door is slightly open, but never wide enough for the hope to spill out unrestrained. Self-sabotage can appear too, but in quiet ways, delaying decisions, muting enthusiasm, pulling back just as something begins to matter. Not because they don't want it, but because wanting something deeply feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, exhilarating, vulnerable, and terrifying all at once. This internal tug-of-war is exhausting, but often invisible. To others they appear calm, composed, even indifferent. But inside, a quiet storm of longing and hesitation moves through them. It is the emotional equivalent of holding a fragile object with both hands, wanting to admire it, but afraid of breaking it. Their hearts lean forward, their minds lean back. Hope rises, fear steadies it. And yet, beneath the conflict, one truth remains: they have not given up. If anything, the presence of conflict means hope still lives inside them, strong enough to stir tension, soft enough to remain hidden. The push and pull is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of caring. Evidence of someone who feels deeply and moves cautiously. Someone who understands the magnitude of their own longing and respects its power. Their relationship with hope is not passive. It is active, ongoing, shaped by years of navigating the space between desire and self-protection. This tension is not here to be resolved quickly. It is here to be understood, to be honored, to be recognized as part of the internal architecture of a heart that has survived disappointment, but still chooses, quietly, to want again. At some point, unexpected, unplanned, something pierces the protective layers. It could be an act of kindness, a shift in circumstance, a moment of clarity that arrives softly but unmistakably. Not all breakthroughs are loud. Some unfold as quietly as a breath, but they change everything. Often, what breaks through is something simple, a feeling that refuses to stay small, a person who listens without judgment, an opportunity that feels strangely aligned, a moment of vulnerability met with empathy instead of dismissal. Sometimes it is loss. Sometimes it is love. Sometimes it is the quiet realization that the old ways of hiding hope are no longer serving the person they are becoming. This breakthrough does not immediately dissolve their caution, but it opens a small doorway, a thin sliver of light, a space where hope can breathe a little more freely, not because they force it to, but because something within them shifts, subtle, tremoring, undeniable. The body feels it first, a loosening in the chest, a deeper breath than usual, a moment where the world seems less threatening and more inviting, even if only slightly. The mind follows slowly. It begins to test the idea that maybe, this time, hope won't collapse, that maybe what's emerging deserves attention, that maybe they can allow themselves to feel without bracing for impact. This phase is not linear. There is courage, followed by retreat. Trust, followed by a need to step back. It is like learning a language they once knew, but haven't spoken in years. Familiar, yet awkward in the mouth. Still, something keeps pulling them forward. Not in a forceful way, but in a gentle, persistent way that feels like life itself whispering. Try to see this. Try to feel this. Try to believe just a little. The breakthrough is not always dramatic, but its impact is. It shifts the internal balance. It allows hope to move from the shadows into the faintest glow of visibility. Not fully expressed, but no longer fully hidden. This moment is tender and uncertain. It marks the beginning of a new relationship with hope, one not built on silence or concealment, but on cautious openness. The heart, once guarded, begins to turn toward the world again. Not trusting blindly, but trusting enough. Enough to consider that maybe hope is not something fragile after all. Maybe it is something resilient, waiting for the conditions that allow it to grow. Healing does not arrive like a sudden transformation. It unfolds slowly, like a dawn that brightens by degrees. For those who have kept hope tucked inside for years, the process of learning to hold it differently is gentle and unhurried. They begin, not by declaring their hopes loudly, but by allowing themselves to feel them more openly. The internal barriers soften. The old instinct to minimize begins to loosen its grip. The heart does not rush. It stretches carefully, like a limb waking from long stillness. Emotional safety becomes central. Not safety from the world, safety within themselves. A sense that they can endure uncertainty without collapsing, that they can desire without demanding guarantees. That hope can exist without the weight of expectation. This shift is internal, not performative. It shows up in small ways, letting excitement surface without swallowing it, allowing the mind to imagine positive outcomes without immediate correction. Sharing a dream with someone trusted, not as a declaration, but as a soft truth spoken aloud. They discover that hope does not need to be hidden to survive. It can be held gently, not tightly. It can be expressed quietly, not fearfully. It can be allowed to expand without threatening their emotional balance. Trust develops gradually, not trust in outcomes, but trust in their ability to handle whatever unfolds. This is the turning point. Hope becomes less about predicting the future and more about allowing oneself to be emotionally alive in the present. Old reflexes still appear. Moments of retreat, flickers of doubt, the temptation to shrink hope back into its familiar corners. But now, something steadier exists beneath those reflexes. A quiet resilience, born not from avoidance, but from growth. Learning to hold hope differently is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming softer without feeling unsafe. It is about recognizing that the heart can expand and contract, hope can rise and fall, and none of it has to threaten the self the way it once did. Hope becomes a companion rather than a risk, a light that guides rather than blinds, a presence that aligns with their inner world instead of challenging it. In this stage, the person begins to understand a deeper truth. Hope was never the enemy. Fear was never the villain. Both were responses to past experiences that shaped their emotional landscape. Now, with wisdom and gentleness, they begin to rewrite that relationship. Hope becomes something they can hold with open hands, not clenched, not concealed, not fragile, simply human. In the quiet arc of a life, there comes a moment when hidden hope steps into the light, not as something fragile or secret, but as something honest, something earned, something that belongs. This chapter is not about a triumphant ending. It is about a peaceful one, a subtle shift where hope no longer feels like a risk, but like a natural part of existence. People who once protected their hope like a flame in a storm begin to understand that the storm has passed, or at least that they have learned how to move through it. Their internal weather has changed. They have grown sturdier, gentler, more attuned to the quiet rhythm of their own emotional truth. Hope no longer hides. It breathes. It softens their gaze. It appears in the way they speak about the future, not with certainty, but with openness. Not with fear, but with presence. This visible hope is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It glows the way sunrise glows across the horizon, slow and steady and unforced. They allow others to see it. Not everyone. Just those who have earned their closeness. The people who listen without rushing, who hold space rather than giving opinions, who understand that hope is not advice or expectation. It is expression. Their hope becomes part of their humanity, not something they feel the need to protect at all costs. And in this openness, something remarkable happens. Hope expands. Not because the world is suddenly safer, but because they are. They learn that even if hope bends, it does not always break. Even if outcomes shift, their heart remains intact. Even if disappointment appears, they can meet it with steadiness rather than collapse. This final chapter is not about certainty. It is about belonging. Hope belongs to them now. Not as a fragile secret, but as a quiet companion, one that walks beside them without fear, without concealment, without apology. And so the story ends where it began, with a light. But now it is no longer hidden, no longer trembling, no longer held behind cupped hands. It shines softly, openly, truthfully. A hope that can be seen, a hope that can be lived, a hope that is no longer something to protect, but something to welcome.